What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my character build series. Today looking at Bilbron ArtiChron, my take on the Chronurgist wizard with a 1-level Artificer dip. And I know it's been a minute, right, since I've done a build. It's, I guess I should explain. It was never really in my concept of the channel to do builds. I ended up trying to do a bunch of them as an effort to grow the channel, and it didn't work. And it turns out that builds just take a bajillion hours relative to other kinds of videos, and I haven't had much time lately. You may have noticed my content creation has slowed down considerably over the last few months because I had to get a real job. And I'd been unemployed when I started the channel and was putting in full-time hours into the channel. But obviously that wasn't tenable once I got a new gig, and I had to spend a lot of time studying and ramping up for my new job. And it's a very physical job, and it seems my conditioning has deteriorated a little bit over the years of sitting around making videos. So my body was just being ground into dust. And even on my days off, I was barely able to walk around and had very little energy and such. But things have, more or less normalized. I am ramped up now at my new gig. I am not completely destroyed every time I work, and in my days off have the time and energy to continue making videos. And I am excited for the ArtiChron. I am actually going to be playing this character on a new Westmarch server that I joined called The Far Frontier, and I'll be doing a storytelling series about my adventures there. I've already had 3 adventures with this character, and have a little bit of a sense of how I wanted to play him and all of that. So I really like the ArtiChron. I think this is a challenger for one of the most powerful builds in the game, just because of how strong the wizard chassis is, and then how strong the Chronurgist subclass is, and how much it gains from that 1-level Artificer dip. So I'm excited to show it to you. Without further ado, let's take a look at Bilbron ArtiChron. So the concept here is a controller wizard with great traditional defenses, by which I mean armor class, hit points, and saving throws, that stands in and doesn't fight from range. This PC does a lot of stuff that makes it want to be on the battlefield and not fighting from extreme range like some spellcasters do, like my current Molbron Dowlockstone build that I'm playing, where he generally gets as far away as he can and blasts away with his Eldritch Spears and such. But this is a character that is going to be using a lot of Sapping Sting, which has a pretty poor range of only 30 feet, and has other abilities that it's going to be taking, like Pulse Wave and such. That means that we are going to want to be standing in and not being super far away. Because it's a Chronurgist, we will be using all of the viable Chronergy spells. I tried to squeeze as many of them in there as I could, and other spells that have good synergy with our role-playing concept. Let's face it, when it comes to optimization, there do tend to be a slew of quote-unquote best spells that we want to take if we're going to fully optimize and maximize our power levels. But it does get boring, always using those same old spells, and I want to lean into the subclass special spells for fun, even if they're not totally optimal, just so there's an actual notable difference between the different subclasses. I feel like a subclass should use the subclass spells and lean into that whole shtick. In actual practice, I don't think it matters much, because I have definitely noticed that the piloting of a build in play makes a much bigger difference than the actual optimization of the build. It really doesn't help to have the best abilities if you don't know when or how to use them properly, and a lot of these builds get very complicated. 5e is a complex game. People are always forgetting about what abilities they have or how to deploy them correctly, right? Or people just do the wrong thing at the wrong time, or they squander their resources and all of that. So I found the variability in playability is far greater than the variability in the optimization of a build, since 5e has a pretty high floor when it comes to power levels. Now, as we can see, I went with Kalashtar here, but pick whatever race you want. It's not that important. And your character concept is probably going to incorporate the race, and it's fine if you want to take a weak race for role-playing purposes. I mean, I'm playing an Earth Genasi right now, and it's not doing jack for me, except fill a role-playing purpose. And that's fine. Again, very high floor in 5e. Now, in this particular case, you might want something with dark vision, might want something that offers 4-hour long rests so you can get great rest tricking. You might want something with full magic resistance. But I like Kalashtar. Getting advantage on those wisdom saves is very nice to help with that hole that we have in our wisdom saves. And psychic resistance is a very welcome add. It's surprisingly hard to get in 5e, and I found that DMs like psychic damage. Even though technically there's only a small percentage of creatures that do psychic damage, DMs do tend to like it because it's very hard to resist. Notably, Bear Totem Barbarians don't have resistance to it, so I've seen it deployed, I think, a disproportionate amount of times relative to the number of creatures that actually have it. So I'm very happy to add Psychic Resistance, and Mind Link is really useful for the interaction phase and covert comms in combat. It basically replicates the tongues and message spells. Now, it is a little bit clunky since you can only talk to one person at a time, and it has a range of only 10 feet per level, but you can definitely work around it. I've deployed it in my 3 adventures with this character already, and it has been very useful. Now, do note Kalashtar are Aberan specific, so it might not be allowed, but I don't think that's going to be a problem at too many tables, right? It's not an overpowered race. And at the beginning, I don't really care about your skills. You choose those based on your concept pretty much, but one thing you do need to start with is Arcana, because we're going to be scribing a lot of scrolls. I mean, pretty much every wizard should have Arcana, right? But I just want to make sure that we do pick it up for that scribing ability. So at level 1, we start as Artificers, so we can get those con saves and that armor proficiency, amongst a few other little benefits like magical tinkering and the extra Artificer spells. Now keep in mind, we can access any Artificer first level spell. That's one of the great things about them. So alter preps as needed, although I think that these 3 that I started us with are going to be go-tos throughout our entire career. And don't forget that we can scribe any of the first level Artificer scrolls. So try to have a bunch of ones like Sanctuary and Featherfall and Disguise Self and Cure Wounds, because those are going to be ones that you want to use a lot of and have plenty of uses of, or utility spells that you aren't going to always want, but will want sometimes. Now, of course, we get Guidance, and that's fantastic. It's one of the best cantrips in 5th edition, not normally available to wizards. Super helpful in the interaction phase and whenever you have skill challenges and such. And we added Magic Stone. So technically it's the best damage cantrip in Tier 1, averaging 6.5 damage per hit, the equivalent of a D12, but we're mostly taking it to set up the Tiny Servant combo later, which we'll talk about when the time comes. At the moment, it is awkward to cast until our Familiar comes online, as we don't have enough hands for our shields, tools, and pebbles, and that's why we're not going with a shield at level 1. We need a tool in one hand, and we need the other hand to handle the pebbles, otherwise we literally have no offense. Now note that it's still clunky to personally throw these things at levels 2 through 4, as we'll have to drop the tools to pick up a stone and throw it, but that's the low level life for you. It does get better, and we will be adding other attack cantrips for primary use, reserving Magic Stone for the Tiny Servant combo when it comes online. But at level 1, we really don't have much choice. And we do get Magical Tinkering, and that can be useful. Specifically, it can make small lights, which can be helpful to us in the dark, since we don't have dark vision, the big weakness of the Kalashtar. And they will work underwater, unlike the mundane light options that we can have, like torches and lanterns. See my deep dive video on Magical Tinkering for more info. Alright, moving on to level 2, we add our first level of Wizard, and we are going Wizard the rest of the way. Now we're starting with our standard 6 spells, but obviously going forward, get all the spells for our spellbook that we can, even though it's tough to squeeze in certain preps. One of the great things about Wizard is its versatility, so add all the spells, especially all the rituals. Right, those are ones that we can actually get use out of even if we don't prep them, so prioritize those. Definitely try to get all of the first level rituals. Now our Familiar is online for all of that little buddy goodness. It's going to be nice for us to cast Cure Wounds through our Familiar. It's going to be nice for our Familiar to sit on our shoulder, and then we can use its Dark Vision or its Blind Sight when we're walking around in non-combat darkness. And when combat starts, we can use our light options. But always amazing to have a familiar. See my deep dive on advanced familiar tactics for more info about how amazing they are. For our opening spell selection, we added an all-defense wizard spell package. Shocking, I know, but I'm Bilbron Bafflestone, y'all. I am a defensive-minded player, and I think all of these spells are pretty critical to a standard wizard. Shield, absorb elements, now silvery barbs. Now, of course, I am assuming that silvery barbs is legal as per rules as written. I know that this spell is widely considered overpowered, so if it's banned, obviously take something else. And note that it's setting specific, so who knows if it's available, but I'm going to assume that it is here. See my deep dive video on the new Strixhaven spells for more info about silvery barbs. Now, we only have 3 slots, so even though we have a lot of cool, fancy new defenses, we are going to have to deploy them wisely. Don't just squander shields and absorb elements if it's just piddly damage, for example. But we have high resilience for a level 2 character relative to our allies. We have a high base AC, currently 18. We have the shield spell available. We have silvery barbs to force rerolls. We have protection from evil and good, which is going to mean that a lot of creatures attack us at disadvantage. And we have absorb elements. So we have got a very high durability. And so as per our role-playing concept, we are going to be standing in, trying to draw enemy attacks. As I've said, I've played this character 3 times already, and I've realized I'm way more durable than my colleagues, so I have taken up the role of running up to the monsters, much like a marshal, and drawing their attacks to me. And I've been fine because it's very hard for them to hit me. I'm pretty slippery, and when they do, I can force them to reroll it with Chronal Shift. That's the sort of playstyle that I like on this character, running up, not being afraid of the monsters, standing in, being able to operate within a constrained environment, and not necessarily having to have a lot of range in order to survive and be effective. Now, if we get in trouble and under heavy fire, we can do the Minor Illusion plus Toll the Dead combo for self-preservation. Toll the Dead has no visible origin, so it will not disrupt your illusion. But keep in mind that this isn't our normal playstyle, and we can be aggressive about using Minor Illusion, since it's non-concentration, to protect the other party caster or ranged attacker. Right? You can create a barrel for them to hide in, and then they can pop up out of the top and shoot their arrows or cast their spells, and then duck right back into your illusory barrel and probably be taken off the table for targeting by most enemies, especially at this level. See my deep dive video on Minor Illusion for more info about how to use that spell, which I personally consider to be the strongest cantrip in 5th edition. Toll the Dead is a nice add for us. It gives us a good cantrip option that isn't as clunky as Magic Stone. We can actually carry a shield now, which is why our AC bumped to 18. But we will drop this later in favor of Sapping Sting. I also added Control Flames to help us out with our light situation. Remember, we don't have dark vision, so we're going to have to figure something out. And what we're doing is we are going to combo Control Flames with a Bullseye and Hooded Lantern and Tensor's Floating Disc, which we also added at this level. So we can affect up to 3 flames, and that means we can use both our Hooded to get 120 feet of light in all directions, and 2 Bullseyes to give us 240 feet of light over 120 degrees forward. We put all of those on the floating disc, and it follows us around without us having to mess with it, providing an excellent blanket of light for us to operate in. When we're not in combat, we can lower the hood. That will reduce it to only 10 feet of dim light, or we can just extinguish them entirely if we need it to stealth around and use an action with a tinderbox to light them up when we need them. Obviously start with the Hooded, and the Bullseyes are somewhat luxuries. You definitely want that 120 foot in every direction. I also like Control Flames because it's nice to have a way to extinguish flames, especially since we're adding Firebolt in a few levels. And that's not that easy in 5th edition. Very easy to start fires, not that easy to put them out. So to be able to do it with just a cantrip is pretty cool. So I like Control Flames here. And of course we add Arcane Recovery with our first level of Wizardry. And that is a sneaky good ability. I want to give it a shout out because I don't see it often mentioned, but it's pretty nice to get those slots back, right? Anyway, moving on into level 3, we now become official Chronurgists, and our Chronergy powers are online. Now, of course, Chronergy is Wildemont specific, but you wouldn't be reading this build if it was banned, right? So Chronal Shift is like the centerpiece power of Chronurgist, and it's super awesome. because there's not that many ways to force rerolls on opponent saves in 5th edition. Because of that, we're going to choose spells that work well with Chronal Shift, adding a lot of saver sucks. We'll definitely be able to stick a lot more of those with Chronal Shift at our disposal. And it will help our defenses, right? It's going to cancel hits, going to cancel crits, and it's going to bump our saves. We also get Temporal Awareness, so we should now win initiative in many cases. And we're adding 2 rituals here and not a prep spell, because if we were to add one, I would just have to drop it at next level. And so I figure it's just better to add a couple of rituals here, and we'll just prep one of the rituals until then. Probably Comprehend Languages, since that's one that you might want to cast very quickly if you meet people. And the others are more appropriate for a 10-minute cast if you want to ritual cast them. Then we move to 4th level and we get cantrip formulas online for awesome wizard cantrip versatility. Very underrated ability to be able to swap out those cantrips, but it just cements wizards as the most versatile casters. With cantrip formulas, we're going to swap out Toll the Dead and bring in Sapping Sting. Just a great Chronurgy cantrip. It's going to be our main attack cantrip, and it's going to play into our controller playstyle, dropping enemies prone to the advantage of our allies. A lot of flavor there. I really like Sapping Sting. It's also great for dropping flying enemies. It's great to combo with grappling allies or summons, right? That way they can't get up and they're constantly prone and suffer those penalties. Just make sure you use it right. You don't want to use it on targets who go before your marshals in the initiative order, because they'll just get up before you can gain any advantage, right? You're going to want to use it on enemies that go after your marshals. And ideally, you're going to ready it until after your desired enemy completes his turn, and then you get the maximum effect. Obviously, you can't do that if you're concentrating on a spell, but for the moment that should be fine because we don't have too many demands on our concentration for a couple more levels. Another thing I like cantrip formulas for is to swap in Shape Water for underwater adventures, or for Mold Earth if you're trying to create defensive fortifications in the right environment and in the right scenario where you have time to plan and such. And we finally get 2nd level spells, so we are going to be adding Web as our go-to concentration and control option, which I think is one of the best spells in the game, but oddly I rarely see it in play. I literally have never seen it cast once on the Forge Concordance, and I'm really surprised by that. So I'm definitely happy to take Web. So nice to get that restrainment on enemies and restrict their maneuverability. And we're also adding Vortex Warp. This is one of the new Strixhaven spells that I really like. It's going to provide some non-concentration control. Moving enemies around is amazing. We can Vortex Warp them right into our own control spells, even at higher levels when we get really good ones. It's fantastic at maneuvering allies out of trouble, or into it if you want to get guys on the front line or behind the lines. And again, it's setting specific, but I doubt too many DMs are banning this one, right? Unlike Silvery Barbs. Haven't heard too much of an uproar about Vortex Warp. But see my deep dive video on the new Strixhaven spells for more info again about Vortex Warp. Now note that both of our new spells are Saver Sucks, so we can use Chronal Shift on that if our enemies make their save and force them to reroll it. That's amazing. And do try to get scrolls. I mean, now that we have access to 2nd level spells, we're going to want scrolls of Dark Vision and Earthbind and Gust of Wind and See Invisible and Rope Trick and Knock and all of those awesome wizard spells that you want to have on a contingency basis but aren't worth prepping. Specifically get a Scroll of Augury to add to our ritual list. Augury is an amazing 2nd level ritual, and this character is not one that neglects the terms of engagement. And with Control of Time, I think Augury has good role-playing synergy. And I feel like we should be able to afford half plate at this point, right? We should have the gold to buy the armor that we want. So half plate or a breastplate if you're the stealthy type. And obviously as we progress in our career, we're going to want to stack on as many pluses as possible to the armor and shield. Next we move into 5th level, and this is a pretty big level for us. If you'll note, we add a lot of spells to our preps and capabilities, because we're adding Fey Touched, and that gives us huge extra spell adds in Misty Step and Gift of Alacrity. We should now win initiative almost every time, now that Gift of Alacrity is online, to combo with our Temporal Awareness, and that's important for our controller playstyle, because we're going to want to be able to control battlefield conditions before friendly fire becomes an issue and dictate the terms of the battle. I really like that about this Chronurgist build, and it's something that I really missed on the Dowlock that I'm playing now. He only has a +2 on his initiative, and I don't really like it too much. We're also going to be adding our first non-cantrip blast in, Tasha's Mind Whip, but mostly because it's also control, right? We're controllers and not blasters. But it is nice to be able to hit the int save. We're already hitting Dex, Con, and Wisdom. To have an option to hit int save is great. If it's just a dumb beast, they're probably not going to be making too many int saves, for example. And I almost went with Rhyme's Binding Ice here. I think that's a great spell, and I've been wanting to use it, but I think I'll save it for another build. I think the role-playing synergy with my choice of Kalashtar race was too tempting, and I wanted Mind Whip there. But if you didn't go with Kalashtar and don't have that synergy or concept to think about, I think Rhyme's Binding Ice is a good option, especially since this character build is about standing in and being close to the enemies, so the fact that Rhyme's Binding Ice is a cone isn't going to be an issue. But I went with Tasha's Mind Whip. Now I also added Fortune's Favor, in part because I wanted to add all of the Chronergy spells that I could, but it is a great no-action defense. I mean, a reroll on your save is always amazing in 5th edition. Now the thing is, we don't really have room to prep it for long. We are going to have to drop this at next level. But I do like adding Fortune's Favor because we can just keep scribing it onto scrolls, right? That does take prep, it can be clunky, but it's a necessary sacrifice because we just have to drop something later once we get better, higher level spells online. Now, one thing I hate about Fortune's Favor is the cost. 100 gold piece cost per cast is harsh at this level, but it will become easier to swallow as we gain in level. And man, at higher levels, the ability to cover the entire party with scrolls when you're doing mega prep for really difficult battles and encounters, that's going to be really nice. So I definitely wanted to add Fortune's Favor, even though it's not really one that we are going to be using all that often because we just can't afford to prep it. Now you can also choose Dark Vision. I almost went with Dark Vision here with the same intent of dropping it later, but just having it available to put it on scrolls so that we can use it when it's really bugging us. But I'm presuming that I'm going to be able to get by with my current operating procedure of using my familiar to look through his senses and get blind sight, because I mostly go with the bat, and use control flames and Tensor's floating disc and lanterns to provide light. I think that is going to be workably fine, and we can afford to take Fortune's Favor. We also get a new cantrip, so we're adding Firebolt here. Now that we're at 5th level, it's going to do better damage than Magic Stone. It's also going to have better range. It's not as clunky. It affects objects, so we can do property damage. So I think it's a nice attack cantrip to pair with Sapping Sting, which is still our main attack cantrip, but it has terrible range and it hits the con save, which is suboptimal at times, so it'll be very nice to have Firebolt to complement Sapping Sting. Moving on to 6th level, we get 3rd level spells and we bring Slow online for a great control option and our go-to concentration option. Now, we could pick a different control option. As controllers, we get a lot of great options at 3rd level, like Hypnotic Pattern and Fear and Sleet Storm, but we are Chronurgists, and since Slow literally affects the time around our enemies, I think the role-playing synergy is too good, and it's a great spell. I mean, it's a save or suck that affects up to 6 enemies with a large AoE and no friendly fire. We can Chronal Shift an enemy if they make the save. So I really like adding Slow here. Now I do want to address summons, because 3rd level summons are where they really start to get good for wizards, and we could go in that direction. And you could go in that direction on this build if you wanted as well and squeeze some summons on there. For me, I wanted to go in a different direction. I am playing a summoner currently, and so I want something different this time, and I'm going to go with different controller type spells. But I do think summoning is the strongest and most optimized choice. So feel free to choose summons if you like. I'm going with controller because I want something different, and I think it just has more synergy with Chronal Shift anyway, right? Controls are usually save or sucks. In addition to Slow, we're adding Pulse Wave. A cool Chronergy spell, it's a decent blast, and it has an interesting control option, right? That push or pull option can be interesting, and we're going to try and combo that with other spells later. Moving into level 7, we add Momentary Stasis, which is an excellent alternative to cantrips once we get our concentration spell down. I think it has amazing flavor for the Chronurgist. It causes incapacitation, so it's great for breaking enemy concentration. You can use it to drop flying enemies to the ground. although they will wake up when they take damage from the fall, but they're down there until their next turn, so that's going to give your allies a chance to pile up damage on them, and they will take damage from the fall, which never hurts. Could be significant if it's from way up there. And note that it can be readied without disrupting concentration. That's great. We'll be able to ready it until just prior to an enemy turn, so we can erase their actions, but still let our allies hit them. Because remember, when they take damage, the momentary stasis goes away. More excitingly, the Tiny Servant and Magic Stone combo is now online. We're going to be casting Tiny Servant with our 4th level slot, that we don't have any 4th level spells for yet, and get 3 Tiny Servants, and then use our Magic Stone to create 3 Magic Stones that they are going to be throwing every round. That is awesome. And as we level, remember that we're going to often have an extra slot that must be used for upcasting, so that is just perfect for Tiny Servants. We can definitely use 5 or 7 or even 9 Tiny Servants instead of 3, although 3 is the minimum, of course. We are also adding Phantom Steed, which I consider to be the strongest 3rd level spell in the game, so very happy to add it for supreme maneuverability. Remember, it's a ritual, and you can cast rituals on the move, so we can make some for the entire party if we really want to put in a lot of work. But at the very least, you can make one for your familiar and tiny servants too, right? And I have in mind the same one for both. They're all tiny, so they should be able to fit on it. And our familiar is going to be pumping out magic stones for our tiny servants to throw, while zipping in and out on their Phantom Steed. Now, I will admit Phantom Steed is not as good for us, since we are not actually playing a ranged play style. We're going to be standing in and be right into the thick of the battle, but it's still nice to have. Elite maneuverability is always nice to have. You're always where you want to be on the battlefield when you have the best maneuverability, but it is definitely better if you have a ranged playstyle. But consider making one for your actual ranged specialist allies, right? They'll appreciate it. The DM might not appreciate it though, so you have to kind of take the temperature of the room and see how he's going to react to you spamming the field with Phantom Steeds, but technically it is possible for us, and if you're optimizing, why not? And with ritual spells, the hope is that you can get them on a scroll or something and just add them to your book. I picked it up with a level here because I'm going to assume that 3rd plus level scrolls are expensive or hard to come by, and Phantom Steed is so good and important that we're going to want to make sure that we add it with a spell add. At level 8, we are going to be adding Psychic Lance as an upgraded version of Tasha's Mind Whip. It's a nice blast that damages even if they make their save, and it incapacitates for guaranteed concentration disruption. So nice offensive add. And then we are going to be adding Divination as an excellent ritual for gathering intel. We can't neglect the terms of engagement. It's great to have Divination on a wizard because it's always available. Even though clerics and druids can get it, they are probably not going to prep it, right? So always happy to add a good terms of engagement bump and intel gathering bump, and very happy to add Divination here. Also, both of these have good role-playing synergy, right? Psychic Lance because we're Kalashtar, and Divination because we're Chronurgist and can see through time. At level 9, we get our second ASI, so we're going to go with Int +2, get more preps, max out our spellcasting. I almost went lucky here and saved Int +2 for 13th level, but we could really use the extra prep, and we depend on saving throws so much that that +1 bump to our save DC is going to be sneaky good and more consistently effective in the field than I think lucky will be. But if you wanted to swap those, I wouldn't think that's crazy. Because of the intelligence bump, we can add 2 preps, so we're going to go with Dimension Door to get more maneuverability, and we can combo it with Contingency when we add it at 12th level. And we're going to add Sickening Radiance as an excellent persistent AoE option. Right, it's nice to combo with Pulse Wave as we can push-pull enemies into it, or Vortex Warp, right, and teleport them into it. And eventually we're going to combo it with Force Cage and the Wall of Force plus Arcane Abeyance combo for the always fun Microwave tactic. So I think Sickening Radiance is a nice add for us combat-wise, and I do think it has nice role-playing synergy because inflicting exhaustion can be easily reskinned as a time effect, I think. Moving on to level 10, we get 5th level spells, and so we add Wall of Force as a no-brainer control option, right? They get no save, so that's amazing. See my deep dive on wall spells for more information about Wall of Force. And on a technical note, if the DM rules that the Hemisphere version has a floor and it's not a dome, consider Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound instead of Sickening Radiance, because that's a spell that you can combo into Wall of Force, unlike Sickening Radiance if it has a floor. We're also adding Temporal Shunt as our version of Counterspell, right? That's why we didn't actually add Counterspell, because it's redundant with Temporal Shunt. And Temporal Shunt is pretty strong relative to Counterspell in that it also works against attacks and has a 120-foot range. And you can upcast it to get more targets, which is pretty sweet. Now, it does allow a Wisdom save, but that's not so bad for us because we can Chronal Shift that, or later use Convergent Future on that. And it will affect spells regardless of their spell level, unlike Counterspell, which has a chance to fail if your Counterspell is of a lower level than the spell you're trying to Counterspell. In order to make room for it, we're going to drop Protection from Evil and Good here. We probably haven't used it in a while because we have better uses for our concentration at this point, but we will make a couple of scrolls of it as a backup. Moving into a level 11, we get a new cantrip, so we add Mind Sliver. It'll be nice for us to set up Save or Suck since we use a lot of those, and we can lock in spells that offer an end of turn save. For example, Slow, right? We can just keep hitting an affected person with Slow with Mind Sliver, and then it's going to be hard for them to make their end of turn save against the Slow. And we're adding Transmute Rock, which is an amazing no concentration control option. You do need to be in the right environment, but when you are, it's amazing. It's a Save or Suck that synergizes with Chronal Shift. It's a good combo with Push-Pull of Pulse Wave or the teleportation of Vortex Warp. It's a great combo with Sickening Radiance for the microwave tactic. It allows us to hit the Strength save as well as Intelligence, Wisdom, Con, and Dex. And I think it has a nice role-playing synergy, as the transmutation can be reskinned as being related to time. More importantly, Arcane Abeyance is online. Oh yeah. This is one of the most powerful subclass abilities in the game. We are essentially going to be using it to generate at least one auto win a day. Because guess what? We can combat cast Tiny Hut. That is so good. If the enemy doesn't have Dispel Magic, combat casting Tiny Hut basically turns in an auto win. Now, you have more than one encounter a day, but being able to get an automatic win in one of them through Arcane Abeyance plus Tiny Hut is just so good. Now, it might very well be the case that the DM is going to house rule Arcane Abeyance so that you can only use it with action casts, and I get it. That makes sense, I guess, if you think it's overpowered. And in that case, we can offload Sickening Radiance to our Familiar's concentration, and then we complete the microwave with Wall of Force. Gotta love the microwave because that is also going to turn in auto wins. Either way, Arcane Abeyance is probably going to turn in an auto win, and that's personally why I don't think it's necessary to restrict it just to action casts. I mean, yeah, it will get rid of the Tiny Hut auto win, but you're just going to get a microwave auto win. But that's neither here nor there. Moving on to level 12, we are going to be adding Contingency, which is a no-brainer, right? One of the best spells out there. We're going to go with Dimension Door, but you could choose to use it offensively with an active trigger. See my deep dive video on Contingency for more info. I like Dimension Door here. We're also adding Mass Suggestion. I think it's a fantastic no concentration control option. Can affect up to 12 people, and it synergizes with Chronal Shift and Convergent Future. Plus, I'm honestly not really that impressed with the 6th level wizard options, so Mass Suggestion I think is the best of them. Moving into level 13, we add Tasha's Otherworldly Guise, which I think is a decent 6th level spell that offers us a fly speed, which can be really amazing, great immunities, which can be amazing, and the versatility to choose between 4 different ones, and a solid AC bump. +2 is great in 5th edition and bounded accuracy. Now we have to make sure that we have Featherfall available for potential falls. I do have it as one of our Artificer preps, but maybe you've swapped it out, so make sure you at least have scrolls. And note that we can combo the fly speed with Pulse Wave to get a 30-foot diameter AoE that pulls enemies into the air and then drops them and does a little extra damage and drops them prone. So that's pretty cool for a controller build. And we're adding Rary's Telepathic Bond. That is a great ritual that I think has great role-playing synergy with the Klashtar, because even though we have been doing the whole telepathy thing for a while, this is like an upgraded version. It's been very clunky just doing one person at a time and at short range. So Rary's is a nice ritual here. And we get a feat, so we're adding Lucky. It's one of the most powerful feats in the game. I always try to add it, And we're going early here on Lucky because it also has great role-playing synergy, right? It's very similar to Chronal Shift, and we are Chronurgists. At level 14, we get 7th level spells, and so Simulacrum is a no-brainer. One of the most powerful spells in 5th edition is going to give us a huge power bump that doesn't pressure our slots, that has cool role-playing synergy, right? We can be like plucking a duplicate from another timeline, and now there's 2 of us. And we're adding Force Cage, which is another no-brainer because we are controllers, and Force Cage is one of the best controls in the game. No save, no concentration, just an auto win when you turn it into a microwave. I strongly consider taking Tether Essence here. I do think that if you're clever with it, you can get some useful effects out of it. And if you're really leaning into taking all the Chronergy spells, I guess you could take Tether Essence instead of Force Cage. But personally, I think it's underpowered for the 7th level slot, even for a Chronergist. And since we are controllers, I just felt compelled to add Force Cage and not Tether Essence. Level 15 is a big level for us because Convergent Future is online. For crazy cool shenanigans, we can automatically succeed on any save. We can automatically force an enemy to fail against a save. So yeah, good stuff. Along with it, we're adding Plane Shift, which is a devastating save or suck to combo with Chronal Shift or Convergent Future, right? It does require a hit and a save, so it might require 2 expenditures of Chronal Shift or Convergent Future to stick it. But man, if you stick it, it is as close to a save or die as you can get in 5th edition, right? It affects like 99% of creatures. Anything that doesn't have Plane Shift themselves is screwed if you Plane Shift them. And that's pretty hard in 5th edition. 5th edition is usually save or suck a little bit. Plane Shift is save or die. So I really like adding that here to go with our Chronergy powers. And of course, Plane Shift is also fantastic utility. So I think that's a great add here. And we're also adding Contact Other Plane. That's a great ritual. You get great intel. It hits the intelligence save, which we are really good at. And if we were to stand next to a paladin, we can spam it with no chance of going insane. I mean, if you can do that, that is amazing because you can just keep casting it over and over and then you know everything. And note that even if we don't have a paladin to stand next to, we have Chronal Shift and we have Lucky and we have great int saves. So we're going to be able to get some good use out of Contact Other Plane and not go insane. Moving into level 16, we get 8th level spells, so we are adding Mind Blank for rest tricking, because it's got a 24-hour duration, so we can cast it the day before and then get the slot back. I think it also has great role-playing synergy for a Kalashtar. And we are also adding Reality Break, which is a devastating Chronergy save or suck. We're going to combo it with Chronal Shift and Convergent Future, and it's got a lot of flavor. And it's effective, and it's going to be fun to cast. I actually am very much looking forward to casting Reality Break for the first time. Moving into level 17, we are going to be adding Feeble Mind as another devastating save or suck to combo with Chronal Shift and Convergent Future. It also has great role-playing synergy for the Kalashtar. And we're adding Antipathy Sympathy for rest tricking, because this bad boy has a 10-day duration. Seriously, read this spell if you don't realize how crazy good it is. It is super good, especially because of that crazy duration where you can basically just stack it on to whatever you're already doing for free. But I mean, it has line of sight effect, guys. It's really, really strong, especially for us since we have amazing intel capabilities. So we're going to be able to dial it into the right types of creatures and get really good use out of it. We also get a feat, so I'm adding Resilient Wisdom to close that hole. We've been trying to get by on rerolls for this long to buff our wisdom save hole, but now we're getting to the point where we're going to be seeing more and more wisdom saves of DC 21 or better. And rerolls aren't going to help us if we only have a wisdom save of +0, so we are adding Resilient Wisdom here to get it up to +6, and now we can pass those high-level wisdom saves. And as a note, we also can't fail a standard concentration check at this point. Level 18 is a big level for us because we are adding Shape Change, baby, and that just breaks Convergent Future. We'll be able to use it at will. Literally every single round, we are going to be able to guarantee a success or force a failure because we are going to Shape Change into a creature that has exhaustion immunity. For example, a Planetar. And since the only thing restraining us from casting Convergent Future every round is the level of exhaustion, having exhaustion from immunity from shape change largely breaks the game. I mean, we are practically unstoppable at this point. Man, that's such a good combo. We're also adding Wish as a no-brainer. I mean, it's probably the strongest spell in the game. It's going to give us supreme versatility. We can do crazy stuff like animal shapes on our tiny servants and all sorts of other game-breaking tech. And it's going to affect more scenarios than shape change, right? Shape change is insane if we need to kill things, but Wish has more versatility for, say, the exploration or interaction phases. Moving into 19th level, we are going to add Foresight for rest tricking, and also since it has great role-playing synergy, since we're Chronurgist, but it has an 8-hour duration, so that means we can long rest trick it, and at next level we're going to be able to cast it before a long rest and get the slot back. We're also going to add True Polymorph for off-adventure shenanigans. That's a game-breaking spell as well. That's a bit too complex to go into here, but I'll do a deep dive on it someday. But super powerful True Polymorph. Very happy to add it here. And we get Spell Mastery. Oh, baby. We will be able to cast Silvery Barbs and Vortex Warp at will. That is crazy good. Now, I could go with Absorb Elements or Shield over Silvery Barbs if Silvery Barbs is banned. Either of those is a great option for Spell Mastery, and Tasha's Mind Whip would be a solid option instead of Vortex Warp. I think it offers better offense, but keep in mind Vortex Warp has really great utility and maneuverability, so I do prefer Vortex Warp for Spell Mastery, but Tasha's Mind Whip would be good too. Finally, we get to level 20. We get our final feat, which is going to go to Meta Magic Adept for Extend Spell, so that we can rest trick our 8-hour duration spells like Foresight and Tiny Servants. And we're also going to add Subtle Spell for covert casts and to defeat silence. For spells, we're going to prep Teleport, because I think any good wizard can teleport. And we're going to add Time Ravage to our book. I think it's a terrible spell, but we're Chronurgists, so I'm going to add it for role-playing purposes. I guess it might be nice in a role-playing sense if you want to punish somebody. Make them super old as like a vengeful kind of play against someone that you really hate. But in practice, we are always going to be using our 9th level slot for shape change or wish or for rest tricking Foresight. We're never going to have room for Time Ravage. So that's it. That's my take on the ArtiChron, which I'm pretty happy with this build. As it stands, I think we've got really effective spells. I think we've got really fun spells. I think we've got spells that work well with our subclass abilities. So I think this is a solid start. I will say that I think that sometimes you have to pivot largely based on the items that you get, right? That's what I'm thinking that I've been finding is that sometimes you want to deviate from what you have planned on paper because you just get a really good item, and it's always hard to predict what sort of items that you're going to get. So for these sorts of builds, we pretend that they don't exist. But if you get something that's really good, it can, give you the incentive to pivot a little bit. But with magic items off the table, I think this build is really good, really strong, really elegant, and really fun. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Bafflestone. See you next time.